What if I told you that one of the most respected saints in Christian history heard demons laugh at the crucifixion of Christ, mocking his wounds, his blood, his suffering, while she was kneeling in prayer? What if those same voices attacked her mind, her body, and her faith, whispering that heaven was silent and that God had abandoned her? Tonight, we enter the terrifying revelations of Saint Bridget of Sweden, a woman whose visions were so disturbing, so theologically dangerous, that Rome itself had to investigate them before declaring them authentic. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and comment where you're watching from. I read your comments, and they help me understand how far these stories are reaching across the world. Now, let's begin. Saint Bridget of Sweden was born in 1303 into a noble family, surrounded by wealth, influence, and the expectations of power. From the outside, her life should have been comfortable, protected from hunger, protected from fear, protected from darkness. But from the very beginning, Bridget was marked by something else entirely, an unbearable sensitivity to the unseen world. As a child, she experienced visions that she did not yet have the language to describe. While other children slept peacefully, Bridget would wake in the night with the sensation that someone was watching her, not with eyes of flesh, but with awareness. She felt presences before she ever saw them. Heavy, cold, patient. Her first vision of Christ came early. She saw him not in glory, but in suffering, his body wounded, his face bruised, his eyes filled not with rage, but sorrow. This vision did not comfort her. It disturbed her deeply, because along with Christ, she sensed something else in the room, something that hated what it was seeing. Bridget would later write that even as a child, she learned that prayer was not safe. Prayer, she discovered, invited attention. She married young, bore 8 children, and lived what appeared to be a holy and respectable life. But behind closed doors, her spiritual experiences intensified. Her prayers grew longer, more disciplined, more focused on Christ's suffering. And as her devotion deepened, the resistance began. At first, it was subtle, a sudden wave of exhaustion during prayer, a sharp pain behind the eyes when she meditated on the Passion, thoughts that did not feel like her own, mocking, blasphemous, intrusive, cutting through her concentration like knives. She would kneel before the crucifix and suddenly hear laughter. Not human laughter, a dry, hollow sound, as if joy itself were being imitated by something that did not understand it. Bridget described hearing voices that mocked Christ's wounds, calling his suffering meaningless, his sacrifice foolish. They spoke with intelligence, with memory, with strategy. They knew scripture, they knew theology, and worst of all, they knew her weaknesses. They accused her of pride. They accused her of delusion. They accused her of wasting her life on a God who was already dead. Yet every time she tried to flee from prayer, her conscience burned. And every time she returned to it, the attacks intensified. This was not imagination. This was not hysteria. This was war. As Bridget entered her widowhood, her mystical life erupted into something far more violent. No longer content with whispers, the demonic presence surrounding her prayers became aggressive. She wrote that during meditation on the crucifixion, she would feel pressure on her chest, as if unseen hands were pushing her down. Her breathing would slow, her limbs would tremble, and then the voices would return, clearer now, louder, crueler. They mocked Christ's nakedness on the cross. They mocked his thirst. They mocked his obedience. One voice, Bridget wrote, spoke with particular venom. It claimed to have been present at Calvary. It described the crucifixion not as defeat, but as temporary inconvenience. It laughed at the idea of redemption. "You call this victory?" the voice sneered. "We saw him bleed. We saw him cry. We saw him die." These experiences terrified Bridget, not because she doubted Christ, but because the hatred in those voices was ancient, calculated, unchanging. She feared that if she listened too long, the hatred would infect her own heart. At times, she would be thrown into despair so deep that she questioned her own salvation. She described moments where prayer felt empty, scripture felt lifeless, and God felt impossibly distant. The demons did not always shout. Sometimes, they simply withdrew, leaving behind silence so heavy it felt like abandonment. And yet, every time she endured, every time she remained faithful through the darkness, something extraordinary happened. Christ would appear, not immediately, not gently, but after endurance. He showed her his wounds. He explained his suffering. He spoke of hell, not as a myth, but as a state of eternal refusal of love. And he warned her, the closer a soul comes to truth, the more violently falsehood reacts. Bridget was not being attacked because she was weak. She was being attacked because she was effective. As Bridget continued to write, her visions did not soften. They hardened. The tone shifted from warnings to accusations, from sorrow to judgment. What once felt like private spiritual warfare began to reveal itself as something far larger, a cosmic conflict bleeding directly into the structures of the church itself. She wrote that demons no longer appeared merely as tormentors during prayer, but as observers, standing silently at the edges of her visions, watching her record each word. Sometimes they would interrupt, laughing at her obedience. Other times, they would whisper corrections, attempting to subtly twist the truth, hoping she would miswrite a single line. Bridget feared this more than physical attack, because she understood something terrifying. The most effective corruption is almost correct. Christ warned her that demons did not need to destroy the church from outside. They preferred to hollow it from within, slowly, patiently, invisibly. In one vision, Bridget saw bishops walking through a cathedral while shadows clung to their robes, whispering ambitions into their ears. Not possession, collaboration. She wrote that demons celebrated not when souls openly rejected God, but when they served him without love, when prayer became routine, when holiness became performance. When these writings reached Rome, the reaction was immediate and tense. Church authorities did not dismiss her lightly. They were afraid to. Bridget's visions were too specific, too theologically sharp, too uncomfortable. Examiners noted that her descriptions of demonic behavior matched centuries of exorcistic knowledge, yet she had no formal training. The investigation dragged on for years. During that time, Bridget suffered intensely. She described nights where sleep was impossible, where her body lay still, but her mind was assaulted by images of hell not as fire, but as order without love. A place where everything functioned perfectly, except mercy. She wrote of demons accusing her directly. You expose us, but who will believe you? They told her Rome would silence her, that history would forget her, that her revelations would be diluted, edited, buried beneath politics and fear. And for a time, it almost happened. But when the final judgment came, Rome approved her revelations. The decision echoed like a thunderclap through the unseen world. Bridget felt it immediately. She wrote that the spiritual pressure around her intensified to an unbearable level, as if something ancient and furious had been denied a victory it had long expected. Hell does not react when it loses a battle. It reacts when it loses ground. As Saint Bridget approached the end of her life, something changed in the texture of her spiritual world. The violence stopped. No more mocking laughter. No more grotesque visions. No more audible blasphemies hurled at the cross. And that frightened her more than anything she had endured before. Because Bridget had learned, through decades of suffering, that demons do not retreat when they lose. They retreat when they change tactics. Her body was failing. Pain accompanied her waking hours. Each breath felt borrowed. Each movement required effort. Those around her assumed she was finally being granted peace. She knew better. In her final writings, Bridget confessed that the most terrifying moment of spiritual warfare is not when evil screams, but when it comforts. During prayer, a presence came to her that did not feel cold or hostile. It felt familiar, almost merciful. It spoke without sound, directly into her thoughts, with a tone that felt reasonable, mature, and calm. You have done enough. The words did not accuse her. They did not deny God. They did not question Christ. They simply measured her life, as if holiness could be calculated and concluded. It showed her memories, not sins, but sacrifices. Years of fasting, nights without sleep, the mockery, the loneliness, the suspicion, the physical toll. Why continue? The presence asked. Why endure further suffering? Why not rest? Bridget realized, with growing dread, that this temptation did not aim to pull her into evil, but to pull her away from love at the final step. She wrote that at this stage, The enemy no longer needs to corrupt belief. It only needs to introduce permission to stop. Her prayers became difficult, not because of distraction, but because of emptiness. When she reached for God, she felt nothing. No consolation, no reassurance, no warmth, just stillness. She described this silence as heavier than any demonic voice she had ever heard. Because silence could be misinterpreted. Was God absent? Or was this the final test? The presence returned again and again, not daily, but patiently. It never pressured her. It never threatened her. It waited. It allowed doubt to grow naturally, like mold in darkness. You are tired, it reminded her. God understands. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Bridget realized the true horror of this moment. The temptation to stop loving God not out of hatred, but out of exhaustion. In one final vision, she saw Christ on the cross, not bleeding dramatically, not crowned in glory, but suspended in quiet agony. He did not speak. He did not plead. He simply remained. And Bridget understood. Christ did not stop because the suffering ended. He endured because love does not calculate its cost. With what little strength she had left, Bridget rejected the voice. Not emotionally, not passionately, but intellectually and willfully. She chose obedience without comfort, faith without reassurance, love without reward. The presence vanished instantly, not with rage, not with despair, but with something far worse. Indifference. She felt it withdraw, not defeated, but unfinished. As if it would continue this strategy elsewhere, with other souls, at other moments of weakness. Shortly after, Bridget's physical strength collapsed. Those with her reported that her final hours were quiet. No visions, no fear, no drama, just breath, slowing, and then silence again. But this time, the silence was different. It was full. After her death in 1373, her writings continued to disturb generations. Not because they described demons as monsters, but because they revealed their intelligence, their patience, and their preference for subtlety over terror. Bridget warned that the greatest danger to faith was not persecution, but comfort. Not temptation, but permission. Not hatred of Christ, but forgetting why he endured. Her final message was never shouted. It was whispered, and that whisper still echoes, especially in a world that mistakes peace for holiness, rest for surrender, and silence for safety.